On to this morning, a special report only here at KIOM. The state's Reparations Task Force now releasing a report that's detailing discrimination that the African American community has suffered. Melody Waintal went ahead and spoke to local black leaders, sharing their thoughts on how the effort could apply to Monterey County.
California is the state with the fifth largest African American population in the United States. But African Americans make up only 6% of the population in California and almost 2% in Monterey County. A year ago, the California Reparations Task Force was created to figure out the best way to compensate people of color whose ancestors were slaves. In early June, they released a 500-page report detailing the discrimination African Americans suffered in the United States and how it played out in California. Cheryl Groves is part of that task force and says the report describes the harms that affected African American communities in this country in education, housing, physical and mental health, and environmental racism.
We think that this interim report is probably the most significant summary of the racialized world that Black folk have to live in this country and in California.
Regina Mason is a former president of the NAACP in Monterey and is now one of the founders of the Village Project in Seaside. She had a career as a social worker before founding her organization and says she's seen the impact it's had on young minorities.
The Village Project exists is because of reparations and making sure that people of African ancestry are getting the kind of culturally congruent services and care and nurturing that they deserve.
Behind me, you can see the Fort Ord Barracks where the military used to be, and Seaside, like the rest of the state, has a long history with discrimination.
In the early 20th century, Seaside was the least desirable area in the county because it was too close to Fort Ord military base and the Presidio to build homes. When President Truman declared that the military had to be desegregated, many African American servicemen came to Seaside and the city population doubled. By 1980, even though no one group claimed to be the majority, Seaside became known as the center of blacks and had the most concentrated population in California between Oakland and Los Angeles. Many African Americans who came to Seaside after World War II were military men who served in Europe with college degrees. On top of that, Seaside became the center of the civil rights movement on the West Coast. From Martin Luther King to Dolores Huerta came to share their ideologies. But during Bill Clinton's presidency, they closed the military base, and according to Regina, it had a tremendous impact on the African American community. Many of the people who lived on the base had to move away from the city.
Jobs were gone, people didn't have housing, and it totally crippled the Seaside community in particular.
One of the things Regina says she would like to see in reparations is turn over the land left over for Fort Ord to the African American community.
So far, they've only published studies with the context of the racial problem in California. The next step is going to be to highlight step by step how the changes and the reparations should be implemented in this community. And as Cheryl says,
this is not just a Black issue. I want to reiterate that everybody in this country, everybody in California has been soiled by the stench of racism.
In Seaside, I'm Melody Waintal with KION News Channel 46.
An interesting story there by Melody. For more information on the reparations report, our local African American organizations, feel free to visit our website, KION546.com.